Hi, everyone. Have you ever heard of the Industrial Revolution as being the rebirth of a nation? Well, I'm going to give it that title because it really did give new life to this country. It started around late 1780s, kind of moved into the 1800s through the 1840s, etc. The actual time frame is a little foggy because the change was dramatic and so much happened. But one thing we do know, America's industrial base was overwhelmingly different as a result of what happened. Now, what happened? What I like to do is point to three different situations that came together that impacted each other. One, method. Two, machine. Three, manufacturing. They all depended on each other, and they were all important in making this whole thing happen. Now, manufacturing, well, let's just go back to the days of the 1700s. Everything was simple. If you had a river nearby, you could probably build a little place where you could do some work and have the source of water be right next to you. And so as a result, many craftsmen had their shops near rivers. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and was nice. People could work and have a simple life. But that was going to change. It changed when methods changed. What am I talking about? Well, have you ever heard of what's called an interchangeable part? You might go, no. Well, let me give you a bullet point of what it is. Now, in a text, they'll probably refer to something like guns. And the fact that you have a gun, it has parts, and they can be put together pretty easily because they are made with identical parts, right? Well, you could do that same way with anything. Say cars. It was like in the early 1900s that we saw the assembly line created. And what they did with the assembly line was take different parts and put them together on a line. Okay? That made things even faster. But before the assembly line, you had parts that were identical. And if you had, say, for example, any kind of, maybe a tool shed that you wanted to build, well, there were parts that were for a tool shed, and they were pre-made. So that when you brought those pre-made parts together, all you had to do is quickly put the shed together. That's the best example I can give you, because they didn't have cars in those days. They didn't have motorcycles. They didn't have electrical stuff. They were mainly basic people. But they had certain things that could be made with certain parts put together. Thus, interchangeable parts made it easier to put those products together, okay? Now, something else happened. Steam power. Now, remember I talked about that little cabin next to the river where you could make something in a craft? That changed when steam power came. When steam power came, and the steam power has been around for a while, but it really took hold in the late 1700s. See, what companies could do was they could move inland. They didn't have to depend on the river. They could have that steam engine, that steam power in their factory, and that factory could move its parts and move its machines right there inland. Oh, that gave a lot of opportunity for people to move in and do this business and do that business. Build factories because they had the steam power. So you get the interchangeable parts and the steam power. Then something else took place, something called the cotton gin. Now, the reason why this is important for two reasons. One is textiles would flourish, making of clothes and stuff. That would flourish because cotton could now be peeled. You basically take the cotton from the plant and take the seed out. The cotton gin made it easier to take the seed away and pull apart the stuff you don't need in that cotton and make the cotton available to all by itself. That cotton gin was a miracle worker. And so that cotton gin gave textiles a boom. it also caused a problem. You see, the South had plantations where they grew cotton. And of course, on plantations, there were slaves. Well, with the cotton gin, because of the cotton gin, more cotton could be produced. Well, the only problem is somebody's got to pick the cotton. Yes. And as a result, more slaves were brought in, and thus more problems regarding North and South. Anyway, that's another story. And then you have the locomotive. A locomotive, why is this important? The train. We were now able to move faster than ever before by train. Now, there was a TV show back in the 1960s. In fact, there were several TV shows in the 1960s that were like Western shows. And one of the characteristics of those Western shows, they always had a train. Everybody was going to the train, whether or not they were going to market or going to visit a relative or just going to travel. The train became such an important part of life. And now that the Industrial Revolution was taking place, the train became a very important part of how companies would transport their goods. It made the process quicker of transport, made it easier, lowered the cost, and therefore made it more available to people. And as I said earlier, people realized they could now travel on a train and see other parts of the country. We were already trying to move west. This made it easier to do. So you got the locomotive expanding the opportunities for people to move and companies to do business. There's something else, a couple other little things that really aren't little. The telegraph. Now, you might think the telegraph's not important because after all you're doing is sending messages, right? Well, think about companies that want to order products. Think about businessmen who want to send information back to their offices. The telegraph was a big, big deal. And it also, again, became important to you and me types because people could go and say, I need to send a telegraph to Uncle Stu, or I need to send a telegraph to my aunt. Well, that was business too. But importantly, for those manufacturers who may be traveling across the country to find a new place to put their factory, that telegraph was great because all they had to do was go to the office, pay their few dollars, and send a message back, say, hey, we found the place, the telegraph. And something else, much more of a social nature. Who can be without the photograph? Now, our day, you got cell phones and everything else taking pictures. In those days, they had this box and a curtain and a guy going smile and a puff of smoke and a photograph. That's my best description. But that became a way of, again, communicating the way families were together, the way men would make their identification known. The photograph became very popular because it was something, I don't want to call it a new toy, but families and individuals loved it to show who they were or show what they loved. Scenery, homes, trees, whatever. So here you have it. An industrial revolution was taking place all because of these three things: the method, the machine, and the manufacturing. Method, interchangeable parts, steam power. Machine, cotton gin locomotive. Manufacturing, factories. And then finally, that telegraph and photograph. Not bad, huh, folks? And honestly, there were some other inventions I didn't even talk about. But you know what? That's why we talk again sometime. Now remember, your teacher has even more answers. Have a good one. Later.